That's helped on shot tonight, yeah.
And the service provider has it out for free.
Has there?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay, yeah, yeah. Just one fellow called me today and was talking to me about it, so just wanted to get some clarification as well, so that'd be good. Perfect, thanks.
Wow. Excuse me. Thank you for that. We weren't expecting that to start before we open tonight, but good evening. Welcome to our town hall meeting from the City of Merritt, dated September 14th, 2021. We'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inklakapma and Silk people. I have one introduction of our new recovery manager, Greg Zolecki. Greg. He'll be looking at our recovery needs for the future. And Adam Etchart, Councillor Etchart, has told me he's on his way from Kamloops. He will be here any minute, so he will be rushing through shortly. So we're aware that the city has faced the most catastrophic disaster ever to hit the city. And since the evacuation order was lifted, many people have returned to their homes. Many have not. Many have returned to half a home in the sense that they have so much work to do. Tonight we're here to hear about the unmet needs of the citizens who are struggling to get back into their homes and recovery for them as well. What does it look like? How can the city assist the residents moving forward? So any questions or comments relating to immediate needs and recovery are welcome. There will be another time and another meeting for residents to talk about past events. So if you've submitted an event or submitted a letter or a note online, that question may not fit into tonight's category, but it will fit into one that we're looking at holding sometime in the new year. For now, our role is to seek out what we can do for those residents facing the most immediate needs in our community. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Smith for an update or an overview of what our recovery plan will look like.
Thank you, Your Worship. Won't speak, of course, to the full plan right now, as that's something that Greg and I are working at building out. But I do want residents to know what the critical activities that council and staff are working on the recovery side right now. The first, and I think council could probably speak to this even better than I can, but I've been on many of these calls, is really around advocacy for those residents who are flood impacted. We recognize that even if you had insurance, it may not be enough insurance. We recognize that many people don't have insurance, and even leaning on the DFA program, these are still losses that are catastrophic for individuals. And so council is advocating with the provincial and the federal government around funding supports for those individuals and how we can hopefully look to raise people up from what is the most devastating loss that they've ever experienced in their lives. So that's the first category. We also recognize that with this, even if there aren't people whose structures were affected because they were renting, there are contents that everything that these people own are gone. And they're not sure what their housing prospects are looking at for the future. So in addition to rental losses, it really moves into what the second category of advocacy, but also immediate action that we're taking, is really around interim housing options, and then as that bridges into rapid deployment of purpose-built permanent housing. So as it stands right now, we actually had the first of the crews that were on the ground today, and there's going to be more tomorrow, and as the week grows, there will be more BC wildfire personnel on the ground. They're conducting the quickest possible assessment, a simple assessment, to be able to get a better feel for people's individuals' housing needs right now, and whether their current needs are being met, or whether they aren't. The idea here is that we may have the opportunity to deploy, it's looking like the earliest opportunity would be in mid-January sometime, third week of January, to deploy, functionally would look like camp-style housing, but it would be housing here in Merritt for rapid housing opportunities. And so we're looking at what the community need or interest in those types of opportunities would be. So I encourage you, anybody who's out, if you have people coming to your door, please do fill out that, it's a 5-question survey that they're coming around and asking in the flood inundation zone. And Greg, perhaps I'll get you to confirm, but we will be putting out, if it hasn't gone out already, that survey online so that anybody can respond to that. We really do want to get as close to an accurate count as possible so we can know what degree of housing we need to be deploying on that side in the immediate term, while we are simultaneously working at what we can do to build out our supply of permanent housing in the 4 to 6 month window that still might not be the types of homes that people are traditionally thinking of stick build or whatever it looks like, but bringing in modular housing and others that would look aesthetically pleasing, and it would look like something that could remain in the community for years to come and still be proud of. But how do you make that come a whole lot quicker for these people that have been displaced? So that's one major initiative on the housing side that's ongoing. The city's had discussions with BC Housing, discussions with the provincial government, and discussions about potential funding from the federal government to be able to make those initiatives go. But we really do need to have that needs assessment before we're in a position to be able to know exactly what needs to be deployed and how. There's a lot of complexities around that as well when it comes to things like pets and families, because a lot of these types of units aren't well configured for either, and so needing to make sure that there's provisions for that. As well, they don't have a lot of kitchen facilities in these types of facilities, which is a real challenge when you're looking at trying to live for, even if it's just a couple months, it's a challenge, but we're looking into those options right now. Then the third major, I'm going to call it the big picture items that council's doing a lot of advocacy, and I've again been in on these meetings, has been around what the future of Merritt is going to look like. Not just in terms of rebuilding the infrastructure that was lost, the bridges, the roads, but at looking at how we can become more flood resilient in the future. And I'll be really candid in saying this will include some very difficult discussions as well as to what our floodplain needs to look like in the future. This may include, for those most low-lying areas, discussions about managed retreat from the floodplain, buyouts, and looking at where these folks may be able to relocate to. We're talking about a diking system, a diking structure that's going to be sustainable, one that's going to be something that will be able to sustain higher volumes of water, to be able to handle the increased severity and frequency of events that we're having with climate change. We can't deny it. And I don't think anybody in this room would try right now. This is something that we have to be serious about. And so we're seeing it on the high water level, we're seeing it on the low water level. These are challenges that we need to make sure that we're preparing for, and we're doing that in partnership with both upstream and downstream communities and First Nations. So those are initiatives that we're working on and will continue to work on throughout the recovery plan. We also have and will have plans for wellness initiatives, as well as cultural opportunities, as well as economic development opportunities, to make sure that we are going to bounce back from this and get back to, I'm so tired of saying the word normal, but normal as soon as possible. We've got a long road ahead of us. I know that many of us who've worked there, but especially those who live there, you see how long this road is going to be. It's a long and hard road ahead of our community right now, and we're going to need all hands on deck to be able to assist each other in lifting each other up to be able to get through it. So those are some of the recovery initiatives that are ongoing, and that recovery plan is something that we're going to be driving forward, and it is going to be iterative in that at the outset we need to get a framework of a plan so that we can get assistance from the province in starting to build out the recovery team, the recovery structure, but the community involvement comes very shortly after that as to what does Build Back Better look like for Merritt? What does our floodplain planning look like? And that's very much a community consultation and community-driven process. So those are the activities that are happening right now, Your Worship.
And the other thing we haven't discussed was with DFA, it's the 80-20, 20% of that cost up to $300,000 is passed on to the resident. And we're looking at the potential for talking to NGOs or funding groups to see what they can do to help with that 20%. We haven't had anything firm to date, but we're still trying. So if we can't answer your question tonight, we'll take your name and number. We will try to get back to you as soon as we possibly can with the information that you require. So I ask that we show respect to each other and understand the issue of the person that is speaking. And I welcome your dialogue. I do ask that if you step up to the microphone, that you do the microphone, because those online can't hear you if you're not on the microphone, and we want the community to hear. So, anyone willing to step up? The floor is open. You can speak for as long as you want. We won't be cutting you off.
Oh, I don't know how to.
If you push the button in the middle.
Nothing more, Your Worship.
Oh, what is that?
There you go.
And do I need to turn it here as well?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. This is totally new for me.
Good evening, Mayor Brown and Council. My name is Laurie Edmunds, and I reside in Phase 3. I was fortunate enough to be unaffected by the flood, but I am very concerned about the people that have been. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to pose, but first, thank you from all the people that I've been talking to for doing something about temporary housing. We hadn't heard until now. It's a huge, huge issue, and I thank you so much for getting on that. And my second thing that I was going to discuss today was about the flood mitigation plans. And if there are to be buyouts in your design, those people need to know, I would think, right away before they put any money and sweat equity into rehabbing their houses that would be raised anyway. So while entire plans are not made overnight, permits are being given, people are working right now, things are happening, and that needs to be kind of decided, I think, right away before anybody puts any more of their emergency funds into fixing their houses. I would also like it if council would make more information available in print, in discussion, for people doing work on their homes. I saw this afternoon that you posted a WorkSafe BC bulletin regarding handling of asbestos, which is very important. I would hope that the homeowners be informed how critical it is when they're working inside their homes, that they wear the proper PPE and the proper ventilation equipment or whatever PPE, that they, for their health, for their future health, they need to be wearing that while they're doing work in their homes, both for asbestos as well as mold and biological contamination that they will be dealing with. And they need, I think, to understand that prior to any rehab that they do, someone test the moisture content and the air quality in their homes so that they don't rehab too quickly and end up with mold issues after the fact that they have to redo again at their own cost after their emergency monies have been paid. And I don't think that when people are dealing with probably the most overwhelming situation they've ever been in, that they are clear-minded enough or have a computer or whatever available to them to do the research that I've been doing, which is, it's quite frightening. They need to be alerted to those issues. And I think that's about it. I realize that you guys are really, really, really busy with infrastructure. So it's not that I think you've been sitting down doing nothing. But and it's great that somebody has now been hired, because this is something that's outside of your scope of people that you already have on staff to do things. But it needs to be done simultaneously. It can't be done after the fact, because so many people are already in the midst of tearing things out and fixing things. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? It looks like Councillor Christopherson has a question. Although we're here to listen most of the time. Councillor Christopherson, if you have a question.
If it has to be a question, besides saying thank you, and I really appreciate your comments, and they're very, very relevant. Samaritan's Purse has been doing a lot of organizing this way. Are you aware of whether they have the kind of instructions that you've been mentioning? Is this a situation we need to look into?
That's a whole big conversation. If you would ask WorkSafe BC, then no. The proper asbestos mitigations are not being done. No, they're not. I don't know that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that answers the question.
It's not through any fault.
No.
And I think I remember staff telling us that they were going to go to the NGOs in the community and make sure that they did have this information available. I think we had heard this WorkSafe issue before. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. Laurie's dead right that there's best practices for handling asbestos that does include an assessment being conducted by somebody that's certified to conduct those assessments. We recognize that on the WorkSafe side, when you're talking about an employer doing it, there's a bit more legislative teeth for how you go about that. There's a lot less legislative teeth with individual homeowners, but it doesn't change that there are still best practices in place. And so I think what Laurie's saying here is that the more that we can do to share that information, both digitally but in print, is what I've made note of here, that the more that we can provide on that front. I can say that I know that Samaritan's Purse, for example, does do safety briefings. They are given PPE. There's protocol that is being taken to try and provide a safe experience. But I think that this is a potential opportunity for improvement and to get some more information about asbestos hazards. So,
if I could just, I'm not finding any fault with any of the volunteer organizations at all. Who could possibly expect anybody from these organizations to have the kind of training and equipment needed to deal with particularly asbestos? It's a very expensive, knowledge required hazard, and so much of BC is going to be dealing with this now, particularly because of the floods. I would say that there's not many experts available to even conduct the testing that needs to be done, but it does need to be done. I wish I could come with a statement and a solution. I've been researching for days and I just don't have that information, but most of the flood response remediation information that I could find on the provincial government site, on the federal site, seems to be aimed at accidental water escape type things, they point out that it's a good thing if you can get the fans and dehumidifiers in to get you within the first 48 hours to get your house safely dried out. Well, so they don't talk about houses that have been underwater for a month. And I couldn't find any information. So.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, one, I love when we hear clear, concise needs and you're saying, hey, this is something that I'm seeing as a need in the community. We've actually heard this now for a few days as people have been in there, and so we started with calls to the province saying, all right, can we, the process is called EAF, expenditure authorization, to be able to look at bringing in people to conduct hazard assessments on a private basis. This is something that can be funded as part of the response on the public side, but individual homeowner, that wasn't something that fits the purview of that program. So just today, actually, we had a conversation with Red Cross on that front to say, all right, is there any opportunity through your program to look at supports to have people come in and do some form of hazard assessment to be able to identify these types of things in their home. So what I will say is, when we find these, we go to the resources that we think might be able to tackle challenges like that. And unmet needs ends up being a huge part of any given recovery plan. And Greg will know it, having done these types of things before. But you end up identifying these, and then you try to find a solution kind of on the fly to address those unmet needs as they arise. And so, yeah, just want to thank you for raising it, let you know that we are trying to find solutions that will help people in aggregate, but in the interim, information is key.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laurie.
Frank Miller, 2199 Merritt Avenue. First of all, thank you for your swift action. Tough times, you'll all be commended for your quick work to make us safe. There is a lot of work to do. Look forward to those meetings in 2022. I'd also like to hear more about your proposed camp setup. I think there's a real use for that in the community. There's lots of incidents where people are going to need a place to shelter, so I'd like to hear more about that. Thanks.
Sean, can I have you respond in terms of when we can have some of that information?
Yeah, so I can provide a little bit more specific information as to what we've done. Right now, we talked a little bit about the assessment side that's being conducted, but I don't want anybody to think that we're waiting until assessments are done. We need that to get the go-ahead on whatever project is going to be, because the province doesn't want to have you bring in way too much, or we don't want to have way too little. We want to get close to the ballpark for the right amount of resources needed. But we're also talking directly with suppliers right now to see what's immediately deployable. Companies like ATCO and others to see what do you have and where are they currently staged. I can talk about certain units that we've talked about, whether it's these 44-person Jack and Jill style. These aren't ideal accommodations for people, but we recognize that people aren't necessarily looking or expecting the ideal right now. They need a place that's safe. They need a place that's warm as we come into the winter season. And so we're looking at where these are staged. Some are in Prince George, some are in Edmonton, some are in Calgary. How are we going to be able to bring these together? We've also reached out to potential property owners of vacant land in the community and looking at identified city parcels that may be appropriate for this as well, so that we can, as soon as we find out what the needs are, we've already talked with potential owners to be able to ensure that they would be comfortable with using their parcel for that, again, as an interim use, and then talking with those suppliers. So the work is happening right now to be able to discuss what that is. Right now, I'd say that the critical factor that we need is the information as to how many people, because anecdotally, it's a lot, and I'm not 100% sure exactly what a lot means or what that looks like right now, but it's a lot. And then the secondary factor with this that we're hearing is that once people know what the style of accommodation is, they may want to be in Merritt if it's one style of accommodation, but once they see what type of accommodation is, maybe their living arrangements in Kelowna are preferred, or whatever the case is right now. So just have to answer some of those questions before know exactly what's going to be deployed. But those are the types of considerations that we're going through and looking at. And the goal is to get this on the ground as soon as possible. And as we're hearing right now, is if we were to pull the trigger today, we'd be looking at mid-January, which is it's going to be a long haul. We're already talking more than a month out in order to make that happen, but we're committed to doing it as quickly as possible as soon as we find out what those needs are. So assessment's happening rapidly. We'll have conversations with the province as soon as we've got any type of data that we will be able to hopefully extrapolate out to the whole. Even if we only have 30% response rate, gives us a pretty good sample that we can use to ballpark what we would need to be able to bring in. And if we needed to bring in more, great. So that's the approach that we're taking right now. And some of the other challenges like pets, kitchen facilities, other things like that, we're going to have to be tackling simultaneously, and they do present challenge too. But that's a little bit more about the plan, if that gives you any type of clarity. But don't have a lot of specifics until we get something approved.
And when we look at those needs, for the individuals filling that questionnaire out, we don't really care if you're in an unauthorized suite or whatever it is. We just want to know what your needs are. We need to know so that we can plan to include you in that plan. So don't worry about what the suite was that you no longer have, if you're in a basement suite or something like that. We just need to know your needs.
Hello, my name is Matthias Wiegand. I live on Cooley Avenue, not far from Adam. And my idea is aimed a little more in the future. I'm hoping that we can form a committee for the city to help with flood mitigation. So there was a couple of emails, 15 notes, read them. One particular issue I would like to bring up is that I don't think diking alone is enough. You heard the accent from Germany. We have, in my country, always straightened the rivers. That's the term they used. And now they're talking about renaturizing. So give the river space to take pressure off the system. I had already emailed the deputy dike inspector about an idea, but not heard back yet. I don't know how much time we have. I have prepared some graphics that might be helpful. We'll do that afterwards. That's all fine with me.
Mr. Smith, did you have a response?
Just want to say fantastic, and I'm so glad to hear that there are members of the community that are in line with this type of thinking. And realistically, this has been best practices now for quite a while. It's just that a lot of communities developed long before these type of best practices were in place. But you look at the BC Diking Guide, and there's some best practices in there, started in 2003, and I think there's an iteration since then, where they look at setback dikes, and again, renaturizing and having it where they serve a recreational purpose. They also allow for widening of the flood channel, provide some ecological and environmental values as well, and really make your floodplain something that becomes an asset as opposed to a liability in your community. And I know council has talked about it. I'm not going to speak for you, but it's been talked about many times that there is going to be a city committee that's going to be involved on this recovery process and providing oversight and guidance in relation to recovery. So again, we don't have...
Whether it's one committee or whether it's several, we're not really sure, but...
Yeah, the other part of my idea for a committee was to involve more. You had already used my wording. Connect with the upstream and downstream communities. And I haven't thanked you for anything yet. So I thank you for working the Sunday night before the flood, because we would have lost people if nobody would have been up looking at the screen. That's boring as that is for the rest of the year. So yes, but for other communities downstream in particular, it's left to chance who's up, who answers the cell phone, and the connection is not always there. In the fires, for instance, I noticed that the YH was on evacuation order, and for 2 weeks it showed an evacuation alert, and those minor little things that you're supposed to look at the official government sources, and they're not up to date. And in a valley like a community, or set of communities like in our valley, people will always look to the city of Merritt to give the updates, and then they are not getting the right stuff and the right information. So that
Yes, I know
I
that.
hope that the committee for that, for all these warnings and so on, would involve members from other communities as well.
Put them right on the committee, that's a great idea. Thank you for that. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to note that if you wanted the written version of Mr. Wiegand's suggestions, these were the ones that were sent on to you on December 7th at 12:30 in the afternoon. So if you wanted the written version of that, where he had already explained all these things. So we're obviously very grateful to him for coming tonight and reiterating those important points.
Thank you. And thank you for that. Is there anyone else?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I have one last thing from some of the groups, Facebook groups that I monitor, I follow. I'm suggesting perhaps we contact Big Steel Box, something along that line, to bring in some containers. There have been residents who've been wholly affected, but they have no place right now to take any of the things that are at NBIT, any of the things that are offered by any of the donations, the recovery groups. So even though they will need beds and furniture, when they finally have some place to live, they can't store that now. And there is some concern that by the time they get to their residence, these donations will be gone or have moved off to some other place that's in a disaster situation. So I thought perhaps Big Steel Box or something like that could come and place some containers. They don't have to be 20 footers or 40 footers, so people can collect what they need so that it's there when they have housing.
And maybe even Chaparral Wilder, Jackson's Road, I think had a number of these containers on site. I don't know when. At some point when I drove by there, I noticed it. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. In talking with a lot of other communities, donation management tends to be one of the most difficult points of any recovery process. In talking with one, there was almost $2 million spent moving donations out of a community afterwards, things that weren't wanted or weren't needed because they were very, very open on the receiving side. And so I think that if there's a way that you can do this very selectively, I think that there's huge value in making these types of programs work. The challenge is that if I'm a bit hesitant to say it. You have to be careful who's left holding the bag afterwards if donations is a wide open box. So really good suggestion, and I think that carefully done, that could be appropriate. We would just need to make sure that we've got a plan for what's happening with those containers, where they're going to go and how they're going to get moved or taken out if things aren't collected from them in time. So thank you.
And Councillor White?
She does have a point there, because I have had, I have talked to a few different people that even wanted to clean the stuff out of their home that they were able to save, and there is no storage available in Merritt at all. All the storage units are full and taken. So I don't know, it might be something to look at somehow.
Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing up that point, and I also wanted to thank the gentleman that just spoke before you for bringing out about the different approaches to the diking and that, because I'm pleased to see it out in the community that people are starting to think that way, because I think it's the way that we have to go, and I don't want it to be a shock to the community. So it's out in the community. Thank you for speaking out here and for providing information. It's extremely valuable. I'm appreciative of all our speakers tonight that are being very, very careful in their words. And
Some of us have more time than you do because we're not dealing with infrastructure and mitigation planning. So if you can ever avail yourself of our services, I'm sure Matthias and I and many, many others are available to research, think outside of the box, do whatever. It's not like we think you're sitting there doing nothing, waiting for us to suggest things for you to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Your Worship, I was wondering if this might be a time to take one of the questions that were submitted by email.
Oh, yes.
So this would be from Ingrid Boys, who was, said, "Thank you for taking the following questions. Some citizens have nothing to return to." Sorry, I'm just getting the computer there. Some citizens have nothing to return to. In some mobile parks, they lost their homes and the land under it as well, escaping with just the clothes on their backs. One, are there considerations or plans of how and where they might be accommodated during the rebuilding of the city, which is particularly challenging if they have pets? And two, is the city or regional district contemplating solutions, i.e. land, that might be available for those fortunate enough to have sufficient insurance to replace their mobile homes but have no place to put them? Thank you.
Well, I need Sean to help with that answer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the first question was interim housing, and the second was land considerations for where those mobile homes might end up going.
Yeah.
So the first one, I am going to hope that's been sufficiently answered by our earlier discussions. We are absolutely looking at interim housing options. To be a little bit more specific, what's likely to happen on the long-term housing side is that we're going to have a gradual timeline here for when different types of housing are going to potentially come online. So we will be looking at the interim housing, which again, ideally we'll be shooting for January for that. I would anticipate somewhere around May is when you'll start to see some of the alternate housing options that might be able to start coming online. Again, that's if we start putting those plans in motion now. So by the time that happens, we might end up be in June or whatever the case is. But 4 to 6 month timeline is what we've been told on those types of options. So again, identification of land, and there needs to be a little bit more planning on that one because it's not interim. This is going to be something that's going to stay in the community, and so you have to make sure that you've got the right site with the right potential owner, if it isn't the Crown or otherwise, to be able to develop something that's going to be good for your community in the long run. So there is a little bit more planning that goes into those. Then what I would say is you've got a tier that I would be putting it somewhere between 12 and 24 months down the road, which you'd be looking at opportunities if it is let's say Crown land, if there's a process there, it would have to be done in conjunction with First Nations and others to be able to discuss relocation options. To give people an idea, Grand Forks is just carrying out a lot of these programs right now from their flood in 2018. So when we're talking about relocation, that isn't something we're talking about happening in 2022 and potentially not in 2023 either. That's a longer process. So I don't have an answer as to what that would look like, but that would absolutely be part of the city's recovery planning, and it would have to be done in really strong consultation with a number of people, in particular affected homeowners. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say what it could look like, but absolutely it's a consideration if the right opportunity materializes.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Charles George. I used to live on 2nd Avenue. In 2018, I flooded my basement 3 feet, and that was the Nicola, and cold water got returned. I think we've done a heck of a lot here as this council in this whole flood. The only problem I had is going through the barriers and all that. I thought I was in a different country, and I'm not bitching. I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad that everything is going, but I live in Diamondville Trailer Park at this point in time, and at this point in time, half of that trailer park is empty. In other words, there's sewer, there's water, there's everything there that the city could take advantage of. Talking to Mr. Klein, he indicates he's in very good stead with the city, and I think if he puts his arm the right way, he might be able to get some housing spots for fifth wheels and whatever until people get back on their feet. So other than that, my next door neighbor moved in. He actually is an expert in removing asbestos and everything else. He now works at Home Hardware. His name's Otto. If you talk to him, he's a knowledge, a whole book full of knowledge regarding removing asbestos and what to do and everything else. I'm sorry I don't know his last name, but I'm sure you can check him out. He just started working there steady.
Is there a chance you could send his phone number my way or have a conversation? We'll connect. We'll connect with you.
Yeah. So I'll give you my number after I'm finishing.
Okay.
Good. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the city again. Like I said, I was a little perturbed at points when I come through the city and, well, you can't go back to your house. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I am. But we did get heck too from the Civic Center. Well, you shouldn't be here and all that. But we're all work together. And I see we're absent by one person here in the council. And if we can't work together, people shouldn't be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg Gray, 1951 Merritt Avenue. I'm certain most of you remember me from my issues on water. Again, we're dealing with this terrible subject. I think one thing that's unmet, and it started at the very, very beginning. I'm not laying blame. I don't know who started or why it was started. But we have parts of this community disliking other parts of the community. It was bad enough when we had COVID and we have vaxxers not liking anti-vaxxers. We are neighbors first and last. And when somebody or something tries to split us, it causes anger. And that anger is in the community. And one of the things that people are failing to realize is anger comes with something called love. And when somebody comes into you, to the city, or to your business, and is angry for something that they feel you've done, listen to them with compassion. Not treat them like they're a problem child. Do not phone the RCMP to have them taken away. There's a way in which it can be handled. And I think that this, as far as the mental health of this community, you've got to think about this community. Everybody in Canada has gone through COVID, but only in Merritt have we gone through COVID for 2 years. We've gone through a fire alert, and we all know that fire rim around this town, and we've now gone through a horrible flood. So the mental situation in this town is extremely serious. And we need to be doing something, and we need the city to step forward and start that process. Yes, you're going to meet somebody who's going to be really, really angry, and that's fine. Calm them down, talk to them. Like Sean was saying, what can we do? Let's calm the situation down. Because as Cyril mentioned, at the beginning, there was an awful lot of animosity. There was water and food available to people. They couldn't seem to get it. There was the people who left and the people who stayed. We don't need this. We're a community. And that does nothing but to divide the community. Thank you for your time.
Sorry.
Mr. Smith.
Actually, one quick question, if I could, for you, Mr. Gray. Any particular suggestions on the mental health supports that we would be looking at that would be of need? We're 100% on board that is a need in the community. And any suggestions as to where we would start that would really make a difference for you or for others would be helpful.
Well, I was trying to think of the solution to the problem. I have a whole rock the table again. I think the city should hire some people, just as they have for the flood mitigation, even if it's on a temporary basis, to phone the residents of Merritt. Instead of putting a brochure up that the person has to fill out, phone them with a nice, polite voice and ask them, how are you doing? Is there anything that we could do to improve the situation? Is there anything that we could have done before the situation developed? Then that person is going to feel that the city feels they're a part of the community. Because you know the situation that I've had before here with council. I can remember the people over the Pine Street development, and you and I talking about that. And, well, that's a moot point now. But I think this is the thing that people are feeling in the community, and it's a strong sense. And it's what disappoints me to see this few people. I had a meeting last week prior to the council meeting, and again, the same number of people. But when you listen to the people and you talk to the people, they're angry, but they won't come out, and they're scared to say something. And as I said to Mr. Luck when I came to a meeting, I'm sorry to hit the camera again, you know, I represent probably 1,000 people, 2,000 people in the community, because I'll come forward. Most people don't, they're scared to. And my friend who came up, he was reluctant to come up and say something, because most people are afraid to speak in public. And he did a fantastic job. And that's what all I can say is.
Thank you.
One more?
Yeah.
This guy last night.
St. Hillers, 2199. Councilor Ranchard, we talked about betterments and betterments to the work, the reconstruction work that needs to happen, particularly down Kootley, where the spillway is there that washed away. I'm wondering what kind of improvements are going in there right now as we build to grade to get ready for the ice jam that potentially is coming this winter, the bigger ice jam that perhaps we should be expecting. So this is money that shouldn't be spent right now. It's to a completion state, I would think, right? Please let me know. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. So for where I don't want to take away from Councilor Etcher. You can.
Councilor Etcher.
Well, I know that in one of our previous meetings, a concern that I had was through the EAF, that if we were replacing sidewalks and building back to a certain level to help with storm drain and new piping, my concern was other areas, maybe underground pipes and drainage and whatnot. So I know that's something that Mr. Heller and I had discussed, and things that we're concerned with in the diking around the homes in the area. So I know that's something that we were hoping to get more information on, and I can see that there was some pipes that were being replaced on Canford when I was there last week, but I haven't seen anything in the last few days to see how that's going. But that's one piece that I know we had discussed, and I think that's a concern for a lot of people, is the diking around the homes. And anyway, that's just something I wanted to add.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Etcher. Thank you for your question. So I'll answer as best as I can. Some of these we have a much more tangible idea as to what it's going to look like, and some of these it's a future plan. So we'll take Canford, for example. Recognizing that if you're going to redo a road, you're going to get the pipe size right and certain things like that. You're going to pay, and council's actually already had a report on this and was the one that authorized certain betterments that were kind of, I'm going to call the no-brainer betterments. But seeing as we're not going to be able to have the opportunity to pave that until the spring, once we have a little bit more costing, we'll bring back options. Or is it going to make sense to put in sidewalks, or whatever the case is, where they may not have previously existed. So I think that that's going to be an ongoing discussion. And quite frankly, it's probably going to depend in part as to how successful we are in, I want to say lobbying, but it's more like a negotiation with the provincial and federal governments for additional resources and supports over and above DFA funding. So if the City of Merritt was left to our own reserves for for betterments, we wouldn't be getting very far. We're really going to need support from our friends in the provincial and federal government in order to be successful. And quite honestly, I think that we've done a very good job to date working to help them understand what our concerns and what our needs are going to be. We're working really aggressively right now, as much as I don't like to say this, but funding is somewhat of a competitive environment. There are other communities that are feeling this as well, and I want the very best for them. But we aren't a province or a country that's made of unlimited dollars, and so we're working very hard to make sure that as quickly as possible, these government bodies know and understand the concerns and the needs in Merritt, so that we can be top of mind when those hard decisions for funding allocation are made. So I think that when it comes to the diking itself, for those that were following through this process, much of the diking system got blown out on the first night, the 15th. And as we were preparing for the second flood warning and the third flood warnings, they came in this event. I've never seen so many crews that were working on temporary dike improvements, and so I fully acknowledge that these are temporary improvements. I think the province would chastise me if I said anything else at this point. But the system that we have right now will be providing, in all fairness, likely better protection than what we had prior to this event starting. So that doesn't mean that we couldn't see flooding, that we couldn't see an ice jam. I don't want to make any assertions in that regard. I'm not betting against Mother Nature. But we're in as good a position as we can be coming into the winter with the current diking system. But I'll say that it's really all about the long-term plan, and you're going to have something that can accommodate flash high flow events like we've had here, but that also mitigate the risk of ice jams for the long run. So I think that that's really what's going to come up as part of the long-term diking design and floodplain design program. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty with it, but hopefully that provides some answer to your question.
Mr. Lewis.
So, Your Worship, if you had anything more to add to that one, then I wouldn't want to interrupt.
Well, I was just try and talk to, I can't talk to as well as you can, but the whole issue of building back better. And right now we've got a 2004 official community plan with a little bit of a upgrade in 2011. And we now have our new plan that is close to being ready for the community to be, and for council to actually put it in place. But according to the ministry, we're not in place with our new plan. We are working currently off our old plan, and we are trying to negotiate hard to get that to that, or get them to acknowledge that we have a new plan that is a month from being implemented. So they're thinking about it. They haven't said no, they haven't said yes, but that's part of the issue.
I can partly answer that. We've largely sidestepped the hurdle, which is because the documents that they needed to see, let me provide a little bit of contextual information for the benefit of the public. As part of the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, it provides funding to bring you back to pre-event state. We don't want to be a pre-event state. We want to be in a state that's a whole lot better than pre-event state. We need that for Merritt. And so a lot of our discussions with the province, and they've been favorable in this. It's consistent with the Sendai framework, which is a UN model, but also the policy, the direction that we understand that the province of British Columbia is looking to go, and really advancing a Build Back Better model that considers the community holistically. And the reasoning for that really is that every dollar that you put into disaster mitigation ends up saving somewhere between $6 and $9 in disaster response, depending on which study you're looking at. But it's considerable savings to invest in mitigation. So I think the province really recognizes that, and the model is changing. So we're working hard to advocate that we shouldn't be looking at past documents or past infrastructure when deciding what infrastructure should be going in today to make ourselves a more flood resilient community. And I would say that as best we can, we're working to make sure that while this is absolutely a conversation about the Coldwater River, this has to be a conversation about the Nicola River as well. We're a community that is bound by two rivers, and we've seen flooding on both in recent years. And so, to the degree possible, we're working to make sure that this is a holistic view of our community in our discussions. So, we're getting good feedback in terms of what those discussions are, and I do think that there will be consideration for what we need moving forward. The question is going to be what model outside of BFA will assist in funding that. But we're working through that, Your Worship.
Thank you. Mr. Rose.
This was just another online question, Your Worship, and I think a lot of it has been answered in the last few minutes, and it's quite closely connected to Mr. Gray's and Mr. Heller's questions, which was from Dave Jackson of 2818 Petty Creek Road, who was asking if staff and council have considered lack of trees and vegetation in the whole Coquihalla region as being a contributor to this, and asking if we will think seriously about the freshet coming without trees and vegetation as planning for rebuilding and locating housing. So it's, again, feeding into many of the same issues.
Mr. Smith.
I think it's a fantastic question, and it's one that's really been advocated strongly by many of our First Nations communities in the discussions that we've had with them. In some of the visits that we've had, I know when the Deputy Premier and Minister Rankin came, that was one of the main things that was talked about, that we have to consider a watershed holistically, and that logging practices and fire have changed how that water runs into the Coldwater River. And so while I can't say that there has been definitive studies on the specific impacts and effects of that, I know that decision makers are very well aware that there are potential upstream practices that could be exacerbating the conditions that we're seeing with flood events. So definitely aware of it, and I'm very well convinced that that will be an important conversation moving forward.
Thank you. Another question, Mr. Rose?
No, Your Worship.
That was it? Well, I'm surprised. Did you have another comment?
So just to clarify the status of incoming questions, Your Worship, we had two that were supplied prior to the meeting beginning. Laurie spoke in person, and Ingrid Boyce has been asked, and then the Jackson's question came in during this meeting that has been asked. So at this point, and if there aren't any other people in the audience who would like to speak, then we've exhausted the questions that were submitted to the study.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Floor is yours. Okay. So yes.
I'd like to say that I've been reading a lot of things about counselors sitting behind their computers, twiddling on their thumb. And I think it's important that the public knows that this entire council, although we weren't in Merritt, we were in other communities with evacuees that were scared, that didn't know what was going on. And each one of us did our part to try and keep them calm and try and help them. Adam was on the phone day after day after day, 10, 12 hours a day with insurance questions for people. Travis was in Kamloops at the ESS with different people. Councillor Luck was in Kamloops at the ESS with different people. Councillor Christofferson was in Salmon and although we weren't out front and center doing what we needed to do, we did what we thought was the best thing to do at the time. Mayor Brown was on the phone with government officials, and the staff was doing their thing, and I think that we did a good job under the circumstances, because I've never been through anything like this before and certainly don't know how to handle it, and I think everybody did the best that they could at the time. Thank you.
And I think to add to that, it's crushing to try to work for a community that is divided, and there are so many negative comments that they go beyond negative. They were pure violent and vile. We had an order, and we had the order for the city for a reason. That order was for the safety of the individuals in the city. They told us they didn't need services, and yet a few days in, some of them maybe never contacted us, but many of them contacted us on a regular basis, demanding services that we could not provide. There was a lot of stuff on Facebook, and I couldn't watch it. Or couldn't read it. I had to get out of it altogether, and I won't ever go back. I won't answer people on Facebook. I won't assume that that's an avenue available for me. I've worked my heart out as best I can. I wasn't in Hawaii. I wasn't in Mexico either, or any other place for that matter. I was here, and when I took a couple of days off to be with my children who were concerned about my health after 20th day, it was hard. I mean, there are council became a punching bag for those that felt they could use us in that manner, and it's been a tough go, a very tough go, and I think we're back on track. We don't have the immediate needs as we had before, and we're pulling through. But we also have that need for mental health briefings and days off and time away, so that we too can be more useful than we were before we left. Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I think that needs to be said. And what I'd like to say to the people here tonight is thank you. Your questions and comments and possible solutions are absolutely invaluable. And I must admit I came to the meeting tonight somewhat in trepidation, wondering what was going to be happening, and you have been a breath of fresh air. Your comments have been bang on, and I just really want to say thank you.
I echo that as well. Thank you very much. Councillor Edgar.
Just with the comments that people have made tonight, I too am grateful and thankful for the respectful comments that people have made and suggestions. They're constructive and polite. As Mayor Brown mentioned, that a lot of the comments out there have been negative, a lot of the things that come on Facebook. When the flood first happened, we were having updates in the morning and in the evening over the computer. Some of us would attend the meetings, and some maybe couldn't be on all the time. We definitely tried our best to attend everything that we could and share information in whatever avenues. Not everybody's on Facebook, not everybody listens to the radio, but sometimes people will call you on the phone with their concerns. So hearing your suggestions and your information, counseling or whatever pieces, information, that ways of putting it out are appreciated and welcome. So thank you for that, and thank you for the information that you have and comments going forward. So, thanks.
Councillor Fair.
Thank you. Don't have a lot to add to that, but I reiterate the statements of thanks that Council has given so far already. You do really represent a lot more people that are shown here tonight by bringing your ideas and your needs forward, so it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Locke, rounding it out.
Thank you. I'm taking my mask off for this, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Just want to follow up a little bit on what Mr. Gregg is saying here, and I would just like to tell a little story. And it's about an anthropologist that was in Africa, and he'd been in this tribe, and he had been working in his tribe, and as anthropologists do the work they do. And the day he was about to leave, he had all the kids were gathered around him, and he thought he would do something kind of cool for them just before he left. He took this big basket of candy he had, and he took it at the end of it, took a long walk out to this lonely tree that was outstanding out there, and he put this basket at the bottom of this tree. And he came back and he said, "Okay, kids, I got something for you to do." And he drew a line in the sand, and he said, "Well, I'm going to count to 3, and when I say go, you run and go grab that basket of candy there, and whoever wins gets the basket of candy." So he got all the kids lined up there, and he went 1, 2, 3, go. And you know what the kids did? They all grabbed each other's hands, and they walked to that tree, took that basket, and shared it among them. The word is umbuto. I hope I pronounced that right, umbuto. It means that I am because we are. And I think that's very appropriate for our community right now. You know what? There were some mistakes made. There was things that were done, but we had a very challenging time. And I just want to say to our staff and the volunteers and to you as citizens, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for everything you're doing. This is not going to be easy as we move forward. We're in this for the long haul. It's going to take us a couple of years to get out of this. Grand Forks, it's been almost 3 years, and they're 80% there. But we need to umbuto. We need to work together. I am because we are. And that's what we got to think about as we move forward here. And just put some grievances aside, put some things aside, and work strong as a community. That's how other communities, it's how Fort McMurray got through this. It's how other places in Calgary, that's how they got together. They're flooding. You look down in the United States right now, they had a 300-kilometer swath of hurricanes go down there. And you don't see anything about people coming together and working together, not complaining and everything. Yeah, things are happening, their lives have been destroyed. But there's many, many things we can do to help each other in this community. I'm out there with my wife, we're doing what we can do, and my back's feeling it. I'm not as young as I used to be, hauling mud in that, but you know what? We can all help out a little bit. Make some cookies and take them to some of the people that are working in the field. We've had people for dinner. We put people up at our house that spent the night because they wanted to spend another day here helping our community. These are people that don't even live in our community, from Kamloops, Stallone, and Vernon, have come down to our community to help our community. We've got to help ourselves too, folks. We're in this together. This is a wonderful community. We're going to rebuild, and as Mr. Smith has been saying here, we're going to build back much better than we've done before, but it's going to take some time. It's a lot of work to do. We've got to negotiate with the senior levels of government. I understand that the Liberals they've said they've got our back. Well, we just got to make sure they got our back. We've got to go in those negotiations and talk to them, and we're going to have to advocate. We're going to have the citizens help us advocate for some of those things too. There's a lot of work to do ahead of us, but we can do it. We get out there, we help each other, we pitch in together. You put an hour in here and an hour in there, before you know it, we're going to get ahead of this tragedy and put it behind us, and it'll just be another mark in the history of Merritt one day, especially as our community's built back much better than it's ever been before. Just in closing, once again, I'd just like to thank everybody for all their efforts, all the things. People have not been sitting twiddling their thumbs and sitting on their butts doing nothing. We have been working very, very hard, all of us. And the staff have been amazing. People coming from other areas and other communities to help us out, from staff from other municipalities have been here to help us. And I just want to thank them a lot and their staff again, and thank everybody. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening. And umbuto.
So thank you. We appreciate your time and your effort coming out. And anybody who has an idea for us, please bring it forward. We are more than welcome to hear your thoughts, and we're trying to work with the community, not against the community. We are the community. So thank you. And